They called humans late, then regretted everything. The stars were dying one by one. Planet after planet had fallen. Smoke and fire now replaced the light that once filled the galaxy. Admiral Threx of the Zolari Alliance stood on the bridge of his warship watching another world disappear into red flames. The Varnak Empire had crushed resistance for years. They were brutal, fast and cold. Every species that fought back was destroyed. No one had slowed them down. Not even the great Korean fleets or the storm tanks of the Dalari. The Alliance was losing. Everyone knew it. Even Threx could feel the fear inside his old heart. A small communication ping echoed on the bridge. The officer standing beside him hesitated before speaking. "A message from Earth has arrived," he said. Earth, the human planet. Threx raised an eye-ridge. He had heard of humans but never seen one in real life. A new species barely noticed in the larger galaxy. They had no great weapons, no famous warriors. The only thing people talked about was how late they were. The war had gone on for 73 years, and humans had done nothing. "What do they want?" Threx asked. The officer read the message aloud. "We are ready to assist. We are deploying forces immediately." Threx frowned. "Assist with what's slowing down?" "Our deaths." The bridge crew laughed quietly. One of them said, "Maybe they'll send scientists to study our bones after we die." Threx did not laugh. He looked out into space where the latest Alliance fleet had just vanished. He muttered, "Let them come. At least it will be one more story before we burn." 3 days later, strange signals appeared near the rim border. Human ships. But they did not look like warships. They had no glowing cores, no high energy fields. The ships were thick, blocky, and strange like ancient cargo vessels. They moved silently. The Alliance fleet watching them was confused. "Are these real warships?" one captain asked. "Where are their weapons? Where are their shields? They must be scouts or decoys." Varnak picked up the signal too. They laughed louder than anyone else. The Supreme General of Varnak said, "Let the new rats try. I want to see what they do. Send one cruiser. Test their courage." The Varnak cruiser moved fast, sleek, and confident. It locked on the lead human ship and fired 2 plasma torpedoes. Everyone expected an explosion, but something strange happened. The human ship moved. Not with power or style, but with pure speed. It jerked left like it had skipped physics and time. The torpedoes missed. Then came the second shock. The human ship did not fire energy beams. It launched physical projectiles. Simple metal shells. The Alliance commanders watching were confused. "That cannot work," they said. "You cannot break Varnak shields with that." But the bullets moved too fast, too sharp, too heavy. They tore through the Varnak hull in seconds. The cruiser broke apart. No lights, no scream. Just metal burning in the dark. The galaxy froze. Threx sat in his chair, eyes wide. What was that? How did they? He stood up and ordered, "Send the message to Earth. Ask what kind of weapons they are using. Ask what tech this is." But the humans did not answer right away. Instead, more of their ships arrived. 50, then 70, then 200. All shaped the same, all quiet, all deadly. Reports started coming from other sectors. Human ground forces had landed on Rethel 9. A Varnak base had fallen in under an hour. No tanks, no drones, just humans with strange gear and old-style guns. Captured enemies said something else. They said the humans did not speak. They did not scream. They moved fast and killed faster. One Varnak soldier said they came through the smoke and fire. "We thought they were ghosts." By the end of the first day, 7 Varnak outposts were gone. No survivors. No answers. Just silence. Threx watched it all in disbelief. He turned to his officers and asked one question. Where did these humans come from? No one had the answer, but one thing became clear. Humanity had arrived. And the galaxy was no longer the same. The first human strike shocked the galaxy. The Varnak Empire had never lost a fleet in under 5 minutes until the day the humans struck. It was not just a loss, it was confusion, silence, disbelief. The kind that spreads like cold air before a storm. Across dozens of command ships, alien admirals stared at screens replaying the same moment, again and again. A human ship smaller, weaker, slower by all visible scans had taken down a Varnak cruiser. That was considered untouchable. Not with energy beams, not with plasma fire, but with bullets, solid flying bullets from what looked like old mechanical cannons. They thought it was a glitch in the data. A fake, a trick, maybe a secret alliance technology, but soon more reports came in from other corners of the front, and none of them made sense. A Varnak listening station deep in the Orion sector stopped broadcasting completely after a small group of human ships passed by. A battle group near the Sirith Belt sent a final message, one sentence long. They are not what we thought, before disappearing from the map entirely. In the war room of the United Planetary Council, diplomats, generals and analysts from dozens of species gathered to understand what had just happened. The humans were late, yes, too late by most timelines, but now every eye was on them. The human ambassador stood quietly in the back of the room, not smiling, not proud, just focused. One of the elder generals of the Krylon Empire turned toward him and asked, "What kind of weapons do you use? What powers your systems? How did you do that?" The human simply answered, "We don't use power the same way we use pressure and speed and intent." Aliens did not understand. Pressure, speed, what did that mean? What kind of strategy was that? Then came the second strike. It happened on Khador Prime, a fortress world protected by 3 defense rings, 2 orbital cannons, and a standing force of 40,000 soldiers. The Varnak believed it was untouchable. They called it the Iron Bone. It had never fallen, even when attacked by 3 alliance fleets at once. The humans sent 8 ships. No one expected a battle. It looked like a joke. 8 ships shaped like boxes floating toward a world made of metal. And guns. The Varnak prepared their cannons, waiting to erase the small threat quickly. But the cannons never fired. At least not properly. Human jamming systems interrupted targeting almost instantly. Not with complex AI or virus codes, but with wideband noise like static in the airwaves, drowning every system in old signals that confused the Varnak tech. The human ships broke formation, diving fast and close, too close for comfort, too close for big weapons. They moved through enemy fire like they had planned it 1,000 times before. One ship went straight into the cannon tower, ramming through like a comet. Everyone thought it was suicide, but cameras caught a final image. The ship did not explode. It opened its side and released over 50 humans in full gear, running into the cannon structure before it even stopped moving. 37 minutes later, the command tower of Khador Prime fell silent. Not disabled, not damaged, completely taken over. The humans had captured the fortress, not destroyed it. They were inside, running the system from within. A full army had vanished under the feet of people who barely looked like soldiers. The Varnak screamed in confusion. The galaxy fell silent. Again on the Alliance channel, a message came through, not encrypted, not hidden, just clear and calm. "This is Commander Blake of Earth Forces. Khador Prime is now under our control. We advise all hostile forces to retreat." The strange part was not just the win, it was the speed, the accuracy, and the silence. No one could see how they moved. No one could catch how they planned. It was like they were always 10 steps ahead, using tools no one respected until now. Metal shells, chemical explosives, analog hacking, low orbit jumps, night attacks, smoke screens. All things the galaxy had forgotten or rejected now. The Varnak couldn't stop them. Every weapon the humans used was basic by galactic standards, yet deadly in their hands. They had no fear of losing ships because their designs were built to take damage and keep moving. They had no fear of death because they did not come to survive. They came to win. Admiral Threx watched the feeds from a secure base. He saw the red dots vanish from the screen, one after another, Varnak positions blinking out like dying stars. He stood there saying nothing for a long time, until one of his aides asked him, "Sir, what are they?" Threx replied, with a voice that shook a little. "I don't know, but I think they've done this before, maybe not in space, maybe not with aliens, but I think humans have always known how to end wars. They just waited until the galaxy needed it, and the galaxy was starting to realize it needed them more than ever." Alien soldiers froze when humans entered the field, the battlefield of Relkar. 7 was a place where sound died quickly and hope died even faster. Varnak forces had taken the planet weeks ago, crushing the native resistance with no mercy, and turning the main cities into command centers filled with walls, towers, scanners, and thick patrol lines. The air smelled of burnt soil and chemicals, and the only sound that echoed through the dark hills was the slow march of armored boots. For the surviving species hiding in the caves and ruins, it was no longer a question of winning, it was a question of when their lives would. But on the 5th night, something strange appeared in the skies. No energy waves, no bright lights, just silent shadows moving fast across the clouds. The Varnak looked up confused sensors and saw nothing. Radar showed nothing, yet the shapes kept getting closer. Then they vanished behind the hills, and for a few minutes the sky was empty again. The Varnak believed it was a trick of the wind or a glitch in the atmosphere. They returned to their stations laughing at the thought of a ghost attack. It started with the lights going out. Every tower, every scanner, every drone camera went dark at the same time. No warning, no alarm, only silence. Then the sounds began. With low, heavy footsteps, not like the robotic march of Varnak soldiers, but something slower and more grounded, something that echoed through the steel floors. Then came the first gunshot. It was not plasma, it was not energy, it was a deep, loud crack, like lightning hitting stone, and before the Varnak could even react, one of their command posts was already taken over. The humans had arrived not in massive numbers, not with flying tanks or hover cannons, but on foot, moving between shadows with strange armor and old-style rifles. They did not speak, they did not shout, they simply advanced, taking down enemy positions with brutal speed and perfect. Amon, Varnak commander, tried to rally his troops, shouting commands into his comm, but got no answer. His comm unit sparked and hissed, filled with static. He turned around to order a defense line and froze a single human soldier standing 10 meters away, rifle raised, face hidden behind a black visor. The Varnak reached for his weapon too late. One more thunderous shot, and everything went dark. The soldiers who did survive said they were hunted, not fought. The humans did not walk, they flowed. They used smoke, they used walls, they crawled through vents and broke doors with nothing but force. They didn't rely on eye targeting. They aimed with their eyes and still never missed. One Varnak screamed into his final transmission, "They don't make noise, they don't glow. I shot one 5 times." He didn't stop, he didn't slow down, he just kept coming. Threx watched the footage from a drone that barely escaped. It showed human Marines walking through the wreckage, calmly checking rooms one by one, while Varnak officers lay stunned on the ground. One soldier paused to help a wounded alien civilian hiding under broken metal, pulling them out and handing over a water bottle before moving on without a word. Threx replayed that moment twice, unsure if what he saw was real. Reports flooded in from across the warfront. Every time humans landed, the same thing happened. Enemy control dropped in minutes, not hours, and when it was over, the battlefield was quiet and cleaned. No loud victory chants, no trophies, just efficient sweeping movements and a short signal sent to the Alliance base area, secure, awaiting orders on Varnak Prime. Fear began to rise, something they had not felt in decades. Their war council had no answers. Their tactics failed, their training meant nothing, their armor was useless. The humans were not playing the same game. They did not follow the rules of galactic warfare. They followed their own rules, and those rules were designed to finish wars, not fight them. Alliance leaders finally began to understand what Earth had been hiding all along. Humanity was not slow, they were preparing. They had spent years watching learning buildings alone. They had not joined early because they were not ready, but once they moved like a knife through soft skin. Clean, fast, deadly back on. Relcar 7, the local people came out from hiding for the first time in weeks. They expected to see massive damage or loud victory camps. Instead, they saw small human camps, silent and neat soldiers sitting quietly cleaning weapons or looking up at the stars, not speaking unless needed. When a child walked up to one of them offering a flower, the soldier knelt down, took it gently, and said only 2 words, "You're safe." And in that moment, something shifted across the galaxy. Humans were not just warriors, they were something else, something the universe had never seen before, something that fought like machines but carried hearts that still knew peace. And the galaxy could no longer ignore. Human strategy broke all known rules. In the high halls of the Varnak War Council, great minds gathered to study the one thing they did not understand: how humans were winning. Every known strategy had failed, every prepared trap had collapsed, every prediction had proven useless. The council chambers, once filled with confidence, now echoed with arguments. Maps were covered in red losses and black marks showing fallen fortresses and vanished fleets. The humans did not follow the galactic war doctrines. They did not value territory. They did not push forward like waves. Instead, they moved like whispers in the dark. The Varnak leaders had built their empire on logic, strength, and repetition. Their plans were perfect by numbers, their armies strong by design, and their ships flawless by technology. But the humans ignored numbers and broke patterns. They used surprise like a weapon. They used emotion like a tool, and most of all, they used chaos. Not as a last resort, but as a first step on the frozen planet of Telos 8. The Varnak had built a trap, a perfect one. They broadcast a fake signal calling for help, leaking coordinates through hacked alliance channels. They wanted to lure the humans into a narrow canyon surrounded by artillery and buried mines. It was a plan that had worked many times before. The trap was ready, the troops were in place, the skies were clear, but the humans never arrived at the canyon. They landed behind it. Somehow they knew. They sent a team not to fight, but to sabotage. They hacked the Varnak artillery, not through complex code, but with old-style pulse disruptors. Small devices that flooded ancient control panels with power surges. When the Varnak tried to fire, nothing worked. Then the canyon itself exploded. Not from human bombs, but from the Varnak's own minds turned against them. The humans had been watching all along. From orbit, from drones, from spies placed days before. And while the Varnak celebrated their brilliant plan, the humans had already written its end. And when the human Marines finally stepped onto the battlefield, they did not rush in, they moved. Slowly, with purpose, with calm eyes and steady hands. No shouting, no rushing, no fear. Only movement. They used old tanks machines with wheels and treads. No hovering, no floating. Just heavy machines that growled across the snow, crushing ice and steel alike. The Varnak had never seen tanks that did not require AI control or energy. Shields. These machines were simple but impossible to stop because they kept going even after being hit. And beside them walked human soldiers, not hiding, not hesitating, but advancing with discipline that looked more like ritual than war. In the capital of the Alliance, word spread fast. Analysts and scholars tried to understand how Earth had built this kind of force. Some believed the humans had fought many wars before joining the galaxy. Others believed they had trained in secret for decades, preparing for something bigger than survival. But no one could explain the level of control they had over the battlefield. It was not just force, it was prediction and patience and perfect timing in one recorded mission. A human unit entered a fortress expected to fall in 3 hours. The fortress was taken in 17 minutes. Not with massive firepower, but with tricks and layers of confusion. The humans cut off light, flooded the halls with sound, then used small reflective gear to make enemies shoot at their own allies. In the middle of the chaos, they walked straight to the command core and shut down the system without a single unnecessary shot. The Varnak could not respond. Their generals were trained for order and direct attacks, not illusions and unbreakable. Morale. They started fearing every quiet signal, every silent patch of space, every delay in their systems. One admiral even refused to leave orbit without scanning for human traps. 20 times over, Threx watched as the reports piled higher. He looked at the map of the galaxy, now covered with more human victories than anyone believed possible. His officers waited for commands, but Threx simply said the old way of war is broken. They have changed it, and we must change or we fallen. Still, the humans never asked for praise. They never broadcasted victory messages or sent recordings of their kills. They left behind food for civilians. They rebuilt basic shelters. They repaired systems they did not need to. In every city they entered, they stayed just long enough to bring calm, then moved on. Alien soldiers, once trained to fear nothing, now froze at the mention of human squads. Stories spread like wildfire, some true, some exaggerated, but all shared the same ending. When humans arrive, the fight is already over, you just do not know it yet. And across the stars, one truth began to settle: humans were not just strong, they were impossible to predict, and that made them unstoppable. Varnak High Command tried to flee too late. Deep in the black sector of the galaxy, hidden behind collapsing stars and ancient debris fields, the Varnak High Command had built their most protected system, a fortress world called Graction, the size of a moon surrounded by 20 defense rings. Hundreds of missile silos, automated war drones, and cloaked mine layers. No Alliance fleet had ever reached it, no signal had ever left without approval. It was the brain of the Varnak war machine, and now that the humans were winning battle after battle, the High Command made their final move. They ran, they abandoned outer colonies, shut down forward stations, and called every high-ranking officer back to Graction. The idea was simple: protect the leadership, hide the nerve center, wait out the chaos, and rebuild the empire from the shadows. It was a tactic used before. It had worked in ancient wars, when threats were slow and scattered, but this time the enemy was human. The Varnak believed the system could not be entered without detection. They believed the codes were unbreakable, the routes unpredictable, the guards unbeatable. So when the first alarm rang, they thought it was a false ping, maybe a glitch in the scanning grid or a misfired beacon. But then the second ring went offline, then the third, then silence on the security screen. Static began to crawl across the data walls. Camera feeds cut off one by one. Internal doors started locking and unlocking without control. Lights flashed red, then shut down entirely. Backup systems activated, but nothing responded. The power was still there. The machines were alive, but the commands were not theirs. In the deepest chamber of the fortress, the supreme warlord of the Varnak stood frozen, his claws tight around the edge of the command table, as his generals shouted into dead cums, all trying to understand how it happened. Who was inside? How did they get here? Who opened the gates? No one answered. Then the voice came, not through speakers, not through the Varnak system, but from a small black device placed in the center of the war table. A simple Earth device no bigger than a fist. A human voice, calm and quiet, filled the room. "This is Commander Blake of Earth Forces. Your defenses were predictable. Your retreat was expected. We are already inside. You have one choice: surrender now, or we end it in 10 minutes. Room went silent. No threats, no explosions, just that voice, and the understanding that it was already over. None of the generals wanted to believe it. They ordered scans, they sent guards, they tried to launch defense drones, but the launch bays had been welded shut. Their best officers were missing. Their outer towers showed no heat signatures, no movement, no life at all. And then someone checked the surveillance history and saw the truth: humans had entered the system 3 days ago, disguised as debris, riding inside hollowed cargo shells launched from a captured outpost outside the Varnak sensor range. They had drifted silently, waiting for the signal, then moved without a sound, without a trace. One team had infiltrated the command ring disguised as engineers. Another had walked straight into the energy core tunnels, wearing stolen suits from a previous raid, and the third had hacked the mainframe from orbit using outdated manual codes from old Earth satellites, completely invisible to Varnak. Firewalls because the Varnak had never prepared for such low-tech sabotage now. The fortress was no longer theirs on the surface. Of the planet, the few remaining soldiers gathered to form a last line. But before they could even aim their weapons, the sky filled with sound, not missiles, not plasma, not energy waves, but sonic bursts, disorienting pulses that made machines shiver. And minds go blank, and then the humans descended fast and quiet, moving like wind through a dead forest. They did not kill more than needed, they did not destroy more than required. They moved through the halls taking control, unlocking cells, releasing prisoners, collecting data, and tagging weak points, and all of it without a single recorded casualty on their side. The Supreme Warlord looked around the war room and finally spoke, his voice no longer sharp, but slow, almost tired. "What are we fighting?" He asked. No one replied. A minute later, another message arrived. Same calm voice, same cold truth. "Graction is under human control. Your war ends now." Back in the Alliance capital, the news spread like fire. The system had fallen, the core of the Varnak Empire was no longer theirs. The humans had done in hours what decades of fleets had failed to do. While the galaxy cheered, the humans said nothing. They did not hold parades. They did not demand praise. They simply sent a single message to all. Major systems war is over, if you want it. And in every corner of space, leaders began to ask not how did the humans win, but why did they wait this long to begin? Humans gave the galaxy a choice: peace or extinction. Across the stars, silence fell. Like a heavy blanket, the kind that came not from peace, but from shock. Every screen, every command table, every war council now stared at the same impossible truth. The Varnak Empire had fallen not in years, not in months, but in hours, and not to a superior alien race or a mighty alliance, but to the one species everyone had once ignored: humanity. Alliance leaders gathered in the core council chamber. A place that had seen centuries of fear and failure now filled with something new: awe. The human commander Blake stood at the far end of the table, silent eyes, sharp posture, still not proud, not angry. Just calm, as if this war had never been a question for him. One elder from the Ilari Confederation broke the silence. First he asked, Why now? Why after all this time you had this power, and yet you waited?" His voice trembled not from anger, but from fear of the answer. Blake looked at them and replied in a tone that echoed through the chamber, "We never had the power before, not like this. We watched, we learned, we listened, and when we came to end it, not to join it, war is not our way, but if forced we finish what others start." The council did not know how to respond. They had seen power before they had seen fleets. The size of moons, weapons that cracked gravity, machines that bent stars. But this was different. This was control at a level beyond technology. It was as if humans had understood the heart of war and cut it out with one strike across the galaxy. Varnak survivors surrendered not because of orders, not because of honor, but because their will had cracked. The stories were everywhere. Human soldiers walking through fire, human pilots flying through asteroid storms, without maps, human squads entering cities and disarming armies without firing a shot, just by showing up. There was one last question that haunted the stars. What would the humans do next? Would they take over? Would they claim planets? Build an empire? Replace the Varnak throne with their own? The answer came the same way all their actions had come: quietly. The humans opened a communication to every major species. One message, one offer, one choice. A short signal broadcast in every known language: this war is over. You may rebuild. You may choose peace. If you raise weapons again, we will return. And you know how that ends. There was no threat in the words, no pride, no demand, only truth. And that truth was heavier than any weapon, because it offered something the galaxy had forgotten. A choice in a burned city on the edge of the Cirrus system. A group of alien children gathered around a human soldier, not scared, not hiding, just curious. They asked, "Why do you fight so well but leave so fast?" The soldier looked at them with tired eyes and answered, "Because we are not here to stay. We came so you could have a chance to stay in another sector." An old general from the Krylon fleet stood before his people and said the humans did not just defeat the Varnak, they defeated the idea. That war is forever. They proved that endings are possible if you are brave enough to make them on. Draction, the former Varnak High Command, now under Alliance custody, sat in silence, watching as their once great empire became nothing more than data. And thus the new Alliance banner flew over the fortress, not human, not Varnak, but something shared, a symbol of survival shaped by the only species that had refused to play the game and had still won it. Blake returned to his ship surrounded by silence. Not celebration, his officers awaited orders, but he gave none. He stood by the window watching the stars, waiting not for applause, but for the next signal, for the next cry for help. If it ever came, he whispered to himself, not all wars are worth fighting. But every war can be finished if you are willing to pay the cost. And in the corners of the galaxy, people began to rebuild, not with fear, not with hate, but with memory. They remembered the fire, they remembered the silence, but above all, they remembered the day humans gave them a choice: peace or extinction, and walked away before hearing the answer. The galaxy will never laugh at humans again. The stars were quiet again, not from loss, but from relief. For the first time in decades, no emergency signals, no cries for help, no fleets rushing to stop another invasion. Just a calm stretch of space filled with slow breaths and second chances across the galaxy. Flags were lowered, weapons were locked away, broken cities began to rise, and the smell of war started to fade. But even in peace, one name echoed through every planet station and council hall, the name of the species that changed everything: humans. In a rebuilt hall on Delros Prime, once turned to ash by Varnak bombers, a statue was being raised. It did not show a king or a general or a great beast. It showed a human soldier standing tall, head slightly lowered, one hand resting on a child's shoulder, the other holding a rifle, lowered, not in use, not forgotten, just waiting if ever needed again. The plaque beneath it read, "They came last but saved us all." No one laughed at Earth anymore. No one called humans primitive or late or weak, because the stories had spread farther than any fleet, faster than any transmission. And these were not tales made to scare children. These were lessons written in fire and silence, stories of soldiers walking through plasma storms, with steady eyes, of old machines that ran through walls like ghosts, of ships that looked like cargo freighters but destroyed war cruisers in seconds, and most of all, stories of a choice offered, not demanded: peace or extinction. In the new Alliance chamber, leaders of 50 species now sat at one table, no longer in fear of war, but in fear of returning to what they once were. They spoke softer, listened longer, remembered harder, because they had seen the price of ignorance. They had seen what happened when power blinded vision, and they knew if humanity ever returned to battle, it would not be to fight for themselves, it would be to end the war again. Commander Blake walked through a quiet hangar on one of the Alliance's new peacekeeping stations, his boots echoing on steel, his face as unreadable as always. Officers saluted. He nodded once, never more than that. Behind him, the Earth delegation, prepared to leave. Their job was done, their presence no longer needed, and still no one wanted them to go. A young officer from the Cernali race stepped forward and asked quietly, "Will Earth take a seat at the High Council now? You earned it, and more." Blake stopped and looked at him with calm, tired eyes, and replied, "We did not fight for a seat, we fought because no one else could finish it. Our place is back home until someone needs us again." Answer was not expected, but it was understood. Humanity had nothing to prove, no worlds to conquer, no riches to collect. Their victory had not been for glory, but for closure, and that made it more powerful than any crown. In the schoolrooms of distant planets, children now studied human history, not just their weapons or their tactics, but their patience, their silence, their restraint, how they waited, how they watched, how they never rushed into battle, but when they moved like thunder. And in the memories of those who once ruled with fear, a new thought began to grow. Humans were not monsters. They were not heroes. They were a mirror. They showed the galaxy what it had become and what it could still be. And when they left behind a new kind of fear, the fear of disappointing them, the fear of wasting the chance they gave back on Earth. Cities returned to life slowly. Ships came home. Families reunited. Names of the fallen were carved into stone under the sky. that had watched their rise and return, and Blake stood alone on a hilltop, looking out across the fields of green. He had seen the stars burn. He had watched empires fall, but this moment, the quiet after the storm, felt like the true reward. Someone asked him, "Do you think they'll ever need us again?" And he replied softly, "I hope not, because if they do, it means they've forgotten." The wind carried his words across the hill like a whisper across the stars, and somewhere in the dark of space, the galaxy listened and remembered. They came last, they stayed quiet, they fought like no one else, and they left with nothing but peace. And from that day forward, no one ever laughed at humans again. Asterisk.